Welcome to the Colts Squad Show. I'm your host, Derek Schultz, and I can't speak for everybody on this panel, but I passed my physical.
And I'm Zach Hicks. I'm just happy that Alec Pierce is back in Indy where he belongs.
I'm Jake Arthur, and I'm ready for some more news, man. This was a slow day. That's not cool.
I'm Alan Pinkett, former Oiler, and to me, the NFL has become Major League Baseball.
Colts Nation, rise up. It's the Colts Squad. Everything Indianapolis Colts every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Circle City, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. It's time to squad up. The Colts Squad Show starts now.
Welcome into the Colts Squad Show, where we're always swinging for the fences. I'm Derek Schultz, longtime Indy sports talker and columnist for the Indianapolis Business Journal. I'm joined by a Notre Dame legend and longtime NFL running back, as he mentioned, with the Houston Oilers primarily, in Alan Pinkett, and Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks. I combined Jake and Zach into Jack. Jake and
Start
Zach.
shipping names online right there. That's how people ship us.
Oh, God. Locked On Colts, your first listen every day. We're usually pretty good on the intros. I'm sorry for tripping all over myself. As Jake had mentioned, NFL free agency has hit big in Indianapolis, and as you can tell, we're still a little bit delirious here in the Circle City. We got a lot to catch up on since the last time we convened the Colts squad together. Thanks to a busy last few days, we'll be talking tonight about Alec Pierce staying, Michael Pittman Jr. going, Zaire Franklin. On our last show, we talked about him being on the trade block. Obviously, he's going as well, and what that means for the Colts here moving forward, including potentially a locker room leadership refresh with two pillar members of the last 7, 8, 9 years of Colts football in Michael Pittman Jr. and Zaire Franklin on their way out. Arden Key, Colby Wooden, and a new look front seven. Colts said they were going to do this. Kwity Paye gone, Neville Gallimore gone. The front seven renovation has begun. We'll talk about the after effects of that and what's still left to be done. And there's still plenty left to be done for the Colts, notably in that edge room. And then kind of going into that, what's next for the Colts in free agency? Obviously, the elephant in the room is the Daniel Jones contract situation. We'll talk about our confidence level, and that's still getting hammered out and happening, which where we sit today at 9:06 p.m. on Tuesday still looks like maybe not a fait accompli, but something that is going to eventually get done. But we'll talk about not only the quarterback situation, but the rest of the free agency situation for the Colts. But Zach, I know you and Jake have been talking a lot about it. Emergency pods, the whole deal as far as Locked On Colts is concerned. The big news this week with Alec Pierce staying, meaning that Michael Pittman Jr. essentially had to go. Zaire Franklin, they did find a trade partner in Green Bay and added some defensive line depth. A lot happening in the last 5-6 days since we last spoke, but what's kind of been your overall reaction to the first big moves of Chris Ballard's offseason entering year 10?
Yeah, I think he kind of just played it the way he should have, right? So at this point of the offseason, this is something that we talked about all offseason with Chris Ballard. It's like, would he have the guts to do what needed to be done this offseason? Like, you couldn't afford to lose a 25-year-old ascending wide receiver who is getting better and better just because you want to keep your buddies around. You know, the guys that you drafted and developed in Michael Pittman Jr. and Zaire Franklin. And this is a tough business where you have to make these business calls over personal calls sometimes. And we all kind of sat here all offseason kind of just like, will he make those calls? And ultimately he has, now I do think he was a little sentimental with the Michael Pittman Jr. trade. I believe he let Pittman Jr. pick his location, and that's why they got so little in that trade. So it was basically just a pure salary dump there instead of like a real trade. I think they probably could have got more sending him to somewhere else, but they wanted to do right by him, and that's just how he operates. But all in all, I think that they got, pretty good return on investment with some of these. Got a young defensive tackle for Zaire Franklin, and then they got their top receiver locked up, and soon they'll have their quarterback locked up as well. So I think he's handled everything pretty well so far. There's still a lot of ways to go with this offseason, but ultimately I think it's been everything that you would want Chris Ballard to do. Now, again, it got dicey there by letting Alec Pierce hit the market. We were all concerned about that, but all is well with getting it all done. And for anyone concerned about Alec Pierce projecting to being the Colts' #1 wide receiver last year, I mean, every underlying metric you look at with this guy says that he has what it takes to be that guy. And I'm sure the Colts are looking at this too. I mean, just a quick selling point here to give all you guys. Essentially on NFL Pro, you can sort by like target depth and just overall, like all these different in-depth metrics and stuff. And pretty much all of them Pierce grades out well. But I thought this was very notable. If you're just looking at targets past 10 yards down the field last year, Pierce was 4th in receiving EPA, 3rd in receiving yards on those targets, 6th in yards after catch over expected, and all these other underlying metrics as well. He was exceptional past 10 yards. He just didn't get targeted under 10 yards. So if you just give him the 140 targets and you're giving him like those Pittman targets underneath, and you keep the target share the way it was past 10 yards, I mean, he was basically performing at a George Pickens, Jackson Smith and Jigba type of level past 10 yards last year. It's just he didn't have any targets under 10 yards. So I'm not saying he's going to be, one of those top receivers, but I could see this is why the Colts are investing in him as that number one receiver. He projects out exceptionally well. He's gotten better and better every season. One of the best receivers in football. I think he was 6th best in receiving EPA on in-breaking routes, and also the 4th best receiver on targets between 10 and 19 yards last year. So basically everything past 10 yards as an ex-receiver, he was one of the best receivers in the entire league. You just got to get him more targets now. And I think the Colts properly evaluated that. They looked at it and they said, Pierce has the potential to be a wide receiver 1 at 25 years old. He's worth the investment, and let's lock him up. So we're critical of Chris Ballard on here, about him being too sentimental and making wrong decisions, but I applaud him for making this right decision. I'm not going to praise him for it, but I applaud him for doing the right decision of getting Pierce under contract long-term because he deserved it and he's an outstanding player, and then shipping off Pittman to clear up that space for him.
Yeah, I think it got a little too close for comfort when it comes to Pierce hitting the market. He was on the market for maybe all of 5 minutes before the news actually broke, but did it really need to wait until actually Monday around lunchtime for it to happen? But no, I'm glad they got that done. It needed to happen. We had talked about it. Like, what does this offense look like without Alec Pierce? You completely lose any semblance of a downfield threat and you become a half-court offense. And that just wasn't going to cut it. So Pierce's reinvestment did kind of make Michael Pittman Jr. expendable, because Pierce mentioned it on Up and Adams. He's like, if I'm getting all this money, I have to be more than an 80 target guy. And you look at it, like, Pierce had a career high in targets last year, but was 4th on the team. You know what I mean? It was Pittman, Downs, and Warren ahead of him. So it's like, if you're going to get him more targets, someone else has to get cleared out. And so Pittman was the obvious choice. Go ahead and get yourself $24 million in cap space and free up room for Alec Pierce to be able to kind of flourish. I am curious to see what kind of player he really turns into. Because like Zach mentioned, statistically, there was very little under 10 yards. I think he had 14 of those 84 targets were within 10 yards, which was like 16% of his targets. It was a very, very low number. He's still not going to be like the bubble screen guy that they tried to do with like Pittman or anything, but you might see him on some shorter slants, some shorter outs and things like that. Things to at least move the chains. He doesn't just have to be a red zone specialist and like a chunk play guy. Like, he can do a little bit of everything, I would think. So that was obviously necessary. I am a bit surprised that we're still, we're going to be into day 3 of free agency, and Daniel Jones maybe only just now will be getting signed. I kind of thought something would be done ahead of time, like even before free agency, only because I've got to imagine in their mind he was their quarterback for 2026 and beyond as soon as he started looking good through the first several games of the season. So was pretty surprised that we're still sitting here without a multi-year deal for him. But when it comes to the Chris Ballard of it all, this is what we challenged him to do. You know what I mean? Like, obviously what we say doesn't matter for him, but like we said, this was the next layer of what he needed to do to become a successful GM, was learn how to kind of hurt feelings. And this sounds so bad, but kind of look at certain guys as assets and opportunities rather than your friends. You kind of have to separate the human element of it sometimes in order to do what's best for the team. And he did, he did put Michael Pittman Jr. in a good situation in Pittsburgh. That is one thing he'll never do. He will never just sell to the highest bidder. He will put guys in the best position, to maybe not necessarily go and flourish, but he's not going to go put them in a dumpster fire, essentially. So, look at that forecast ahead to Anthony Richardson. Whenever he gets traded, it may not look like the best spot to all of us, but it's going to be a good situation for Anthony. But, he's letting these free agents walk, like Kwity Paye. He's gone to the Raiders. Braden Smith, he's now gone to the Texans. So guys who we knew they couldn't really bring back monetarily, he's actually letting them walk. And he started to do a little bit of that last year as well. EJ Speed was another one who we said absolutely cannot come back, and they stayed true to that. So far, I'm enjoying what's going on, but it's far from done. Arden Key was a decent addition, but right now he would be penciled in to start opposite of Laiatu, and that can't be the case. They need to do more, and they need to make sure that they don't have any massive needs heading into the draft, or otherwise you're just going to be putting a bunch of pressure on rookies once again who deserve the grace of time to develop, but may not get it if you're shoving them into a prominent role that they're maybe not ready for.
So the big win this free agency period wasn't the signing of Alec Pierce. It was the fact that I get to keep saying the Labrador receiver.
We need to get T-shirts, Alan.
But no, wasn't surprised that the Colts retained him. I didn't think they would make him the highest paid free agent wide receiver in NFL history. But, when you look at all of his metrics and the fact that he's so young and has such a bright future, then it's money well spent. I was a little surprised that they let go of Pittman, that you would break up the gang to, somebody had to be sacrificed. A little surprised at that, but like you said, Zach, it was a necessary thing that had to be done. If they wanted to keep Pierce, then somebody had to go. And that's just, the modern NFL salary cap system, which I still say is un-American. But they are definitely remaking this team and letting them walk. And, one of the things, the statement I made in our little whip around is it feels like Major League Baseball is because maybe I haven't been paying attention, but this year it just seems like so many people being traded or getting acquired. And that's what it's like every year in baseball, is, you might think you'll have a guy on a team for 4 or 5 years. Shoot, the next 5 years, that dude might be with 5 different teams, and so it kind of feels like football is getting that way. And that's why I say it felt like Major League Baseball. And it usually doesn't happen that way in football because usually it takes a couple years, 2 or 3 years to just get indoctrinated into that team's system, that team's culture. You have some leeway in terms of growing with the team, but now with the new NFL, they're expecting instant results now that they sign you. I'm not trying to hear about you growing with the team. No, you got to come in and make plays right now. But that's the new NFL. That's the way it is. But going back, it is a remaking of the team. And I guess what you consider the leadership on this team, those guys are gone. But new leaders will emerge. I remember when I was in Green Bay with the Packers, Sterling Sharp was the actual leader of the team. He was, but he talked so much noise to Brett Favre that, yes, Sterling got injured, but Mike Holmgren wanted that to be Brett Favre's team, and he had to eventually let him go so that it could become Brett Favre's team. And I think now with that old leadership gone, that we're saying this is Daniel Jones' team. He is the de facto leader, and they're going to try and ride that horse until they kill it.
Yeah, I want you to actually hold that thought, Alan, because we're going to talk locker room leadership and getting a little bit of a refresh coming up a little bit later on in the show, because I think that's part of this story too. Not just the fact that Michael Pittman Jr. and Zaire Franklin are leaving, but what that leaves behind for the Colts and the opportunity, I think in a positive way, what it leaves behind. But next, the Colts front seven going to look a lot different next year. We'll talk about the renovation that is already underway when the squad show returns. This portion of the Colts Squad Show brought to you by our friends at TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you. That's turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment with TurboTax today. And we're back on the Locked On Colts Squad Show. Thanks so much for joining us alongside former NFLer Alan Pinkett and the Locked On Colts duo of Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks. I'm Derek Schultz. Really appreciate you being here. It's been a very busy week for Colts news. We were talking about Alec Pierce to kind of begin here, and just sort of a parting thought as well on that. You know, we talked about last offseason, Chris Ballard jumping into free agency and bringing in Mooney Ward and bringing in Cam Bynum as well. And then this year, maybe it's a new Chris Ballard because of the departure from the past and kind of letting guys go. I think he does deserve credit for navigating that situation the way that he has so far, even if there were some risks involved with letting Pierce have to turn down more money to come back to the Colts. Like, obviously that's process wise, but result wise, it ended up working out. I will say though, sometimes you do things not because you want to do them, because you're forced to do them. And part of me does wonder, if all things were equal, if Michael Pittman Jr. would still be here, if Zaire Franklin would still be here. But we'll never know. And now this is a situation where the Colts are going to have a lot of changes as far as their leadership is concerned, and especially a lot of changes on the front seven. Look, Grover Stewart, I know that we've talked about him as a cut candidate, probably will be back. DeForest Buckner, I'm assuming, is going to come back. Obviously, Leatu Latu is going to come back for a third year. But really outside of that, Zach, changes abound, right? Not only because you have a lot of guys that just happen to be contract casualties. Like, we knew Kwity Paye wasn't going to come back, Samson Ebukam, guys like that. But just because they've been adamant about getting younger and faster, and you're going to have a complete changeover as far as the linebacker room is concerned, and the defensive line depth is also going to look a lot different now with the additions of Key and Wooden, and changing some of those names and faces out.
Yeah, I think they're on the right track right now when it comes to what they're doing with their front seven, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and they can't go into the draft with the way that the current roster looks in multiple spots, not even just the front seven, from the safety depth chart to the backup running back situation, to the wide receiver depth chart. Like, there are some things they still need to get at least a little bit more warm bodies in here before the draft, just so you're not so pigeonholed. But looking at the front seven in particular, I think, again, they've navigated it fine so far, but it's about what the next steps are with this front seven, because as we're looking at it currently, their base 5-2 or 3-4, however you want to classify defense right now, it looks fine on the interior, right? You have Buckner and Stewart, and you have Wooden coming in there being a guy that is going to rotate with Adetomiwa Adebore. So that looks solid. Then you look at the edge, and I think you have two workable pieces in Leatu Latu and Arden Key. But who is like your true pass rush winner? Like, even if you project Leatu Latu to take a step, right? Like, did you really get better at edge with Arden Key, who was kind of around the exact same in terms of pass rush win rate as Kwity Paye and Samson Ebukam last year? Now, I think he's a lot more explosive. I think that he's better for the stunts and just a better fit in the way the Colts played defense last year. But I'm not going to say that he's a solution to the defense right now. He's better in a rotation than he is as a bona fide starter. And then the linebacker room, don't even get me started with how that looks right now with Shea Alubi and Austin Ajike as your two starters right now going into the season. And as Jake said earlier, we don't even know if Shea Alubi will be back coming into the year. It might just be the CFL guys and Austin Ajike are the only guys they have.
Jalen Carlisle.
Well, not for much longer if Lou has anything to say about that.
Right.
But yeah, they still need to add some guys here in free agency. But I think the start has been fine. I'm a big fan of Kobe Wooden. I think he showed a lot of things last year. Better at 3-tech than nose tackle, and I hope he gets more 3-tech run this next season. And I think Arden Key's a fine rotational guy, but we'll see what the next chips are in building up this front seven. Like, is it just drafting linebackers to start? Because that could be risky, but it could pay big dividends as well. We'll have to see who they plug in there at linebacker, especially in the draft. Are they swinging big for Trey Hendrickson? I mean, I know the Ravens are going to be active with him tomorrow now after all this news that dropped tonight. But, you know, if they're able to land like a Trey Hendrickson, that changes the picture a little bit, even though he's a bit older. And if they don't land Trey Hendrickson, do they pivot to an Arnold Ebiketie or a Caleb Von Chison, who are a little bit younger and a little bit faster and kind of fit what they're going for? So we still have to see how the chips fall a little bit with the front seven. I think the start has been fine, but if this is all it turns out to be before the draft, then it would be a massive letdown. But so far, I think it's been okay. I just want to see what the next steps are with that front seven.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think you go ahead and you add some things in free agency just to make sure you're comfortably placed there at the position. And then in the draft, you go ahead and fortify and you bolster, and that's when you really build up the waves of this pass rush and what you want it to be. I will say, like, I know people kind of hit the panic button a little early sometimes with free agency, just like when some of the big names aren't landed and everything. Like, they're more small and moderate names first. One thing that like always gets kind of overlooked is like, a lot of these players themselves aren't like super engaged yet. Like, a lot of them honestly might be on vacation right now. You know, like, they're just not super actively engaging in talks and stuff quite yet. So like, some of the movement will still happen. Like, I know today was quiet after kind of a busy first day, but things will pick up. Like, there's still plenty of players out there for the Colts to get. I would anticipate them after already getting Arden Key. I would probably imagine they're going to get another edge rusher at the very minimum of his skill level, hopefully a little bit better, a little more of an expensive player, I would imagine, because we know drafting edge rushers, that has not been an instant hit. Sometimes it's never even an eventual hit. So I do think you've got to get at least a couple just veterans who you can survive with before then throwing another draftable edge or two in there. And then when it comes to linebacker, I've kind of told Zach, like, I'm really not in love with this free agent class. You maybe get a veteran in there just to like have an adult in the room, someone who has been there and done that and knows what they're doing, so that you're not just throwing rookies out there expecting them to execute this dynamic, sometimes complex Lou Anarumo defense. So that does make sense. I mean, that's why we saw Joe Bacci come in last year. It didn't work well, but that's why we saw him. But I would still even probably draft 2 linebackers. Like, this is a really, really good linebacker class this year. And there's some decent edges to be had within the first 3 or 4 rounds as well. So I would absolutely load up in the draft on front seven. But again, make sure you get some adults in the room first in free agency. Don't be done addressing that quite yet. You do need a nice little blend of veteran, gray in the beard a little bit, but also some youth and energy coming in here as well.
You got to remember, Jake, they only have 2 top 100 picks though, so it's tough to address all the 2 linebackers, a safety, and 1 to 2 edge rushers when you only have 2. I mean, I like, honestly, the way that GMs stack boards, the draft ends starting in the 5th round, right? That's undrafted free agency essentially in 5th round. That's when their draft board ends. So they basically only have 3 picks in draft range in this draft. So that's
not how Chris sees it though.
Well, it's him getting his early jump
Why
on
you
undrafted
8-9?
free agency.
I was saying
It's basically I get to claim my undrafted free agents before they're there.
every draft pick except for maybe one will probably make the roster this year, I'm sure.
We'll see.
They usually
we'll see
do.
for sure. But I do think, again, like get some older players in here as well still, just to bring that floor up. And then you don't feel like, oh my gosh, these top 2 picks, we have to take linebackers no matter what. Because
Well,
that's how you get in trouble.
Cincinnati, they did that. They got rid of Logan Wilson. They got rid of Jermaine Pratt because they brought in Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter. And it went horribly.
Right.
Like it went so bad. Like I liked what they did in theory, but in practice it went very bad.
Right. You just got to have some of those vets in place though before you make those picks. Because say you draft those guys and they end up being like Demetrius Knight in camp, and it's like, oh no, we can't. We can't start this guy, but he's the only guy left. We have to start him. So it's like you got to have at least some vets in there just to bring that floor up a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I think is evident to all of us is they're not done. Just a couple of days into free agency, and let's keep in mind when you re-sign somebody, that's an acknowledgement that guy is good. But if a team really wanted to keep one of these guys, they would have re-signed them. They would not have traded them, or maybe they feel that their talent is descending. So it's not like you're getting a bona fide star when you're picking up a free agent, so you can't build your team off of free agents. You do have to do some more work, and the draft is just one of those ways. So I don't think they're done, by a long shot in terms of how they're going to remake this team. The draft is going to be very, very important. And unfortunately, without a first round draft pick, they cannot miss on their second, third, and fourth rounders. They cannot miss because, like you guys said, once you get past the 5th round, you might as well get a free agent, undrafted free agent, and usually those guys drafted in later rounds are guys that are going to play special teams or guys that you're going to see in December because the starter got hurt. Yeah. So they're not done by a long shot.
Yeah, if I want to just to give you guys a little bit of insight on how the draft goes, once the 5th round starts, and I actually had an agent on Locked On Colts like 3 years ago explain this. Once the 5th round starts is when the agents start fielding calls from pro scouts and assistant GMs. And basically like, hey, this is what we're offering if your guy goes undrafted. And then if the agent is good enough at their job and says, hey, so-and-so team is offering $100,000 guaranteed, then your team can be like, okay, then we'll draft him here in round 6. We'll draft him here in round 7. Therefore, we are confirming that you're going to be on our team. So essentially it's like claiming undrafted free agents in those final rounds. And basically those picks are made by pro scouts. Like Jalen Jones, for instance, was not a Chris Ballard pick. Chris Ballard did not care for Jalen Jones, the draft pick, and he had to be talked into by one of the pro scouts. I think it was Anthony Coughlin.
It was Anthony Coughlin,
yeah. Anthony Coughlin was all about Jalen Jones, and that's how the Colts ended up with him. Isaiah Rodgers was a similar situation. So again, it's nice to have those picks because then you get your first dibs on undrafted free agents, right? So I'm not saying these picks aren't valuable, but when you're trying to build out like starters or projecting like legit role players, especially in year 1, the picks that matter are those top 100 picks, those top 150 picks, because the draft board ends after there. So again, like if the Colts want to go into the draft with, okay, we probably need 1 to 2 linebackers, like that's fine, right? But if you go into the draft with, we need 1 to 2 linebackers, we need a strong safety, another receiver or 2 would be fine, backup running back, edge rusher would be fine. You don't have the picks for that. So they certainly need to address some of these. So as Alan says, they are absolutely not done. I think they're waiting on, once they get the extension done with Daniel Jones, they'll have plenty of cap space to get other things done. I think they're waiting for the Trey Hendrickson domino to fall, whether that falls for the Colts or falls for another team, and then they can pivot to some of these other free agents. But I will say this real quick, because I know I've been talking a lot this segment. The Arden Key deal, basically a 2x11. Like if you look at the guaranteed money, it's a 2-year, $11 million contract. I've criticized Ballard a lot in the past for just not utilizing the middle tier of free agency. He's always been $10+ million per year guy, or vet minimum guy. He's
bargain
never done
bin. Yeah.
It's always been that, right? But he's always stayed away from that like middle ground of like giving a guy $5 million per year, giving a guy $4 million per year, just to be like, again, these aren't great players, but they're guys who can maybe be spot starters, right? He's always avoided that. And as long as that's what Arden Key is, which is what his contract is indicating, I think more of like those signings are exactly what the Colts need. Like, even if they bust, right? But getting guys who have started in this league before, who are quality spot starters and can give you some quality snaps. So you're not going into the draft saying, well, it's either Hunter Wohler or a 7th round draft pick as our starting strong safety. I think he's done a pretty poor job of that in his tenure, but I do like Arden Key showing that like, this is the type of signing I've been begging for years. And like, maybe this can be the start of what he's going to do in the rest of free agency after the Hendrickson domino falls.
Two captains moving on. As always, new voices will have to take their place in the Colts locker room. We'll discuss the positives and negatives of this situation when the Colts Squad Show returns next. This portion of the Colts Squad Show brought to you by FanDuel. College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into an even bigger potential win with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want. Rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits. And it's championship week for the big boys. And you know the conference tournaments can get crazy. Always adds to the excitement to load up on the plays on FanDuel. Go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. You do you, right? Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. Halfway through and rolling right along on this Colts Squad Show, Tuesday edition. Thanks so much for joining us. Zach Hicks, Jake Arthur, Alan Pinkett, Derek Schultz here as well as we get caught up on what's been a very busy break since the last time we talked to you on Thursday with the start of free agency and the Alec Pierce signing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Zaire Franklin and Michael Pittman Jr. both departing. And by the way, you know, for as much as and I know our friends in the comment section have some feelings about Zaire Franklin. We've been critical of Zaire Franklin. I don't think you could have handled it any better than he did. Was flowery and loving on the way out to Colts fans. I mean, genuinely a really good guy. Say what you want about him as a player. Say what you want about him occasionally having to put his foot in his own mouth. I don't think anybody should dislike Zaire Franklin, the person. But, you know, as I mentioned on this show multiple times, I think there were a lot of positives to moving on from Pittman Jr. and from Zaire Franklin and just giving the locker room a little bit of a refresh. Not because they're not good guys, not because they're not still effective players, just because it just feels stale. And I wanted to start with you, Alan, here because you kind of had it both ways, right? You were in Houston for a long time, and a lot of the guys you played with were in Houston with you for a long time. There was a lot of longevity. You guys had a lot of success there in the late 80s and very early 90s with the Oilers. And then you had mentioned your stint in Green Bay, which was kind of a different situation, right? They were trying to build that thing up because they eventually became a Super Bowl champion not too far after that, when moving on from Sterling Sharp and then, you know, obviously Brett Favre rising into a Hall of Fame player. In your experience in the NFL, what were some of the positives in kind of having this happen with where you're changing out some of the locker room voices, and what could potentially be some of the downfalls of such a thing as well?
Well, you always want people that are centered on winning. And when I was in Houston, the unequivocal leader was Warren Moon, but he was not a vociferous leader. He did more of his leading by his play, but he was the unquestioned leader on that team. And I remember when he got hurt at the end of one season, and his backup was a guy named Cody Carlson. And I just remember us collectively, you know, saying to ourselves, okay, we got to step up our game because we don't have our leader. And unfortunately, what happened with that is Cody looked good and ended up getting, at that time, we're going back 40 years, got Cody a $2 million contract. And we all knew he was not the player that Warren was. But there was definitely clear leadership, and we had a couple of guys on defense who were clear voices and leaders. Some of them spoke better than they played, but they were leaders. And, I think the thing that made our team in Houston good, at least under a guy named Jerry Glanville, was we ranged from choir boys to gangsters. But we all liked each other and got along. And so that's that camaraderie aspect that I think is so important on a team. So going to the Packers, that really did not exist because there was division on that team. That I knew it was probably wrong for Sterling Sharp to just call out his quarterback in the middle of practice. You would say stuff like, "Damn, Brett, do I have to throw it to myself?" You just, if you want that guy to be able to, make a throw in a key moment, you can't be dogging them like that. But also, you had leadership that came in that totally turned around that team, which was Reggie White. So it's good to have your homegrown leaders in the locker room. I hope I'm answering your question. It's good to have homegrown leaders, but it's also good to shake it up every now and then. I think when Reggie White came in there, it just totally changed the whole attitude of that organization. And when I was with Houston, it was a steady organization with Warren. Of course, Warren outlasted me there, but I know that just in the little time he was injured and it was trying to be changed, it was uncomfortable because we knew who the leaders were in that locker room. And you don't have to be a captain to be a leader. The guys in the locker room know who the leaders are. You don't even have to be a starter to be a leader. Guys know who the positive forces are in a locker room. So you just want to be in a situation where it's positive leadership, team-centric leadership that you're getting. That way everybody falls in line. You don't want, a bunch of guys pointing fingers and blaming everybody else, because that tears the team apart more than anything else.
Yeah, and here's the thing. At the end of the day, this is a result-driven league. And this is what our biggest complaint has been about Chris Ballard and, to a degree, Shane Steichen now heading into another year of him as the head coach. At the end of the day, it's results-driven. You could have the right process. You could have guys who are natural-born leaders, thinking that they're doing everything right, performing the way they should. I mean, look, Michael Pittman Jr. and Zaire Franklin, not bad dudes, and they said a lot of the right things. And I do truly believe they were loved in that locker room. But when you have 3 monumental collapses in just the last 5 to 6 years at the end of seasons to miss playoffs, when you are constantly underperforming as a team, when we've had multiple situations where, 2024, Kenny Moore after the Giants game being like, some guys didn't have the best week of practice and, the effort out there hasn't been enough. And that wasn't the first time we've heard stuff like that in the last 5 to 6 years. Again, it's not even trying to say that this is all on Zaire Franklin or all on Michael Pittman Jr., but when they've been part of this same leadership council for that entire time, it's time to shake some things up. And I'm not saying that's exactly what the decision came down to here. I think a lot of it was just financial, especially with Pittman. I think ideally they would have loved to have kept him around, but just financially it didn't make sense. Franklin, I think, was a little bit of scheme change and other things there, but again, sometimes your message gets stale, even if your message is the right message. And now it's time for younger players to be that next step up. Players who, like Alec Pierce, is getting paid like a wide receiver 1 and like a top guy in this league. It's time for him to take on a leadership role. Daniel Jones. I mean, one thing we can say about these last couple of years with the Colts is, regardless of what you want to say about Daniel Jones and his talent and whatever, right? he is a guy that I think a lot of players gravitate towards. And this is what we've seen even with the Giants. Like, he was a guy that had a lot of good connections with players, even with the Giants. Whereas the quarterbacks that have gone through here as starters with the Colts since Phillip Rivers, it has been pretty wishy-washy with how they have led the team. Carson Wentz was kind of, in and out of being like in that leadership role. Matt Ryan tried, but he was just cooked at that point. Gardner Minshew was very aloof, Joe Flacco, very aloof as well. Richardson, not really ready for the moment. So Jones coming in here was like a breath of fresh air, I think, for the locker room. We saw that when he was healthy early in the season. So it's going to be a lot of it on Jones being that leader. And like Alan said with Warren Moon, having the quarterback be the leader makes things a lot easier, right?
Yeah.
When him and Alec Pierce come in here with their giant contracts, with giant expectations for both of them, the goal is for them to be part of that leadership committee and be guys who lead by example and by their play. So it's like they need to step up this next season. It's no more relying on some of these other guys. Like, these are the new blood that people need to really like revolve around. So it's going to be really big to see what these guys can do going forward. But the leadership group, I think, did need to change, even if they weren't saying like the wrong things. It's just too many poor results. And I think it was time to change.
Listening to you guys sort of reminds me of the definition of insanity. And that is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So we had to break that string.
The good news is, I think some of their strongest leaders and some of the most important roles behind the scenes are still there. When I think about the guys who I know hold players accountable and like have Shane Steichen's ear and are like truly some of the biggest leaders behind the scenes, I think Kenny Moore, Quentin Nelson, DeForest Buckner, Daniel Jones, those guys are still there. Nothing against Michael Pittman Jr. or Zaire Franklin. I mean, Zaire Franklin was everyone's hype man. You know what I mean? He played a very important role in keeping guys engaged and energized and ready to go.
He was Pittman like Flavor Flav.
Exactly. Yeah. The biggest hype man. Michael Pittman Jr., one of the Iron Men and one of the guys who best led by example. So they are losing two leaders, but like, I do think some of the more hardened leaders in that building that you probably wouldn't want to lose are still there, luckily. But they do need some new guys to step up. Like I'm thinking of like Mooney Ward would be great. Like, that's a guy who has had success in the NFL. He's won Super Bowls. This is the first losing season he's had in a very long time, perhaps ever in the NFL, now that I think about it. I mean, he's had other kind of fish to fry. He's had bigger problems. Last year didn't really go his way, but like Cam Bynum is kind of transitioning into that as well. So there is some leadership. There's a void to fill as well. But that's kind of what this does. I was talking to Zach about this the other day. Like, when these leadership voids get created, it's an opportunity for new guys to step up and kind of fill that. Like, Quentin Nelson was always a leader, but he felt after Ryan Kelly left that he really needed to take it up another notch. You know what I mean? And as a result, we saw visible evidence from Quentin Nelson constantly at how much more of a leader he became. So these guys leaving, I do think naturally more people will kind of rise up and hopefully start to kind of fill those holes. And whatever leadership looks like for them, whether it's by example, whether it's pulling guys aside, whatever it is, I do think there will be some guys that step up. And maybe there are some guys who aren't even in the building yet that could fill those spots. But I do hopefully think, this is a place that wants to have the locker room kind of police itself, and that will probably take care of itself.
Real quick here before we get to our final segment, there has been a lot of chatter in the comment section here about Nick Cross signing with the Patriots. The person who has tweeted that has been right in the past a lot, but he is having a really rough offseason in terms of getting things right. So
who is it? Who we got?
It's the Ricky guy who last couple off seasons he was money. This year he's been maybe at like a 10% hit rate. So
it's a dog for what it's worth.
Yeah, we will wait and see on Nick Cross. We will see if he ends up being a Patriot. But there is that rumor out there that he could be signing with the Patriots, but we will see. I think the Colts are ready to lose him if they did, but we'll see if that ends up being true by the next couple of days.
And if I'm not mistaken, that would kind of be like the last one, right? Because Braden Smith's already gone, Kwity Paye's already gone.
The last big one. Yeah.
I've always sort of assumed that Nick Cross was going to be on his way as well. So there'd be some finality there.
Pelissero's talking Samson Ebukam up a lot, so don't worry. That'll be the next
that was funny, man. When he talked him up the other day, I was like, Samson Ebukam. He just paid you good money for that one.
Speaking of the big fish that are still out there, what's our confidence level in the Daniel Jones deal getting done, and what do the Colts need to do next in free agency? Plus, kind of save this to last, Zach hasn't even talked about perhaps the biggest signing of the last 48 hours for the Colts. We'll talk about all of it when we wrap up the squad show next. Back for a final time on the Colts Squad Show. It's Alan Pinkett, it's Jake Arthur, it's Zach Hicks, it's me, it's you. Thanks for joining us. Whether you're doing so live right now in our YouTube comment room, you guys have been great the last couple of shows. We really appreciate that. We're happy that you consume the show at any time, whether it be an hour or two after, a day or two after we go. Obviously, Tuesdays and Thursdays is our off-season cadence at 9:00 right here on Locked On Colts. But let's get the bad joke out of the way. The biggest deal of all, and we didn't even have Zach react to this. $1.4 million for Blake Grupe, the kicker coming back. I do think at the very least it's an interesting sort of deal here because you have him and Spencer Schrader, and you're going to have a bit of a competition, I'm assuming. So I don't know. Maybe that's good. We've been wanting more competition for the Colts, right? Yeah. These position battles.
Hey, the only thing worse than investing money in kickers is not having a kicker, I guess. Like just not, having the position be awful or something. So, I mean, if this is going to make me not have to talk about the position during the season, then I'm sure with it. So, yeah, may the best man win. And heck, maybe they can flip one of those guys at the end of the preseason for a conditional pick or something because they're both proven guys after what they did last year. So, I don't mind it. Like, kicker stuff, I guess.
Kicker stuff, I guess. It's a perfect way to put it.
Be done. I honestly, this was one of my favorite moves, and I'm not kidding. Like, kickers are important. You have to have them, and they are always one of your top scorers. Usually they're your top scorer, unless you have Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, or like a freak show on your team. The kicking position is quite critical. Spencer Schrader was great in his first 5 games, was the AFC Special Teams Player of the Month for September, but you don't know what he's going to look like coming off a shredded knee. You know what I mean? So he missed 1 kick all year, none of his extra points, missed 1 field goal. And then Grupe was 21 of 21, made every field goal, made every extra point in his 5 games. So, he was a restricted free agent. You had to do this. Whether he is coming in because Schrader doesn't look like himself and you want him to compete, or Schrader is just not ready to come back physically, you have this guy here ready to go. So kicker is not sexy, but it's always good to have a good one. Like
my only argument here is you were saying they score the most points. Yeah, the worst kickers still score the most points on a team. Like that doesn't do anything for me, Jake. Like
I'm just
the
saying
nature of the position. Like you could be the worst kicker in football and you're still going to score more points than anyone else on the roster.
That's the point though. They're given the most opportunities to score, so they better be good at it. Like if you're having this guy go out there to score the most points, he better be good at it.
Well, I'll put a positive spin on it. I think the best thing about the situation is there's competition. And when you have competition, that's what makes you better. I could tell you 1,000 stories about I did much better when there were, a threat to me losing my job than when I was solidified in having the job. So competition just is great for an athlete. It's great for anybody to have competition because that brings the best out of you. And so hopefully it'll bring the best out of one of these kickers. See, they just know that, a miss is like a bogey in golf. And you can't have too many bogeys or you ain't winning.
That's actually good. My bad kicker joke for Zach turned into like 4 or 5 minutes of a productive discussion about NFL values and things like that.
All I
Jake and I
know-
are breaking up now on this one, I think.
Well, so here's my favorite thing about Blake Groupie. He weighs as much as my daughter, but he has the leg of like Brandon Aubrey from the Cowboys. Like he is magnificent. You know what I mean? Like the man is like 5'6", 150 pounds and has a howitzer on his leg. He was 4 of 4 on 50 yards in just 5 games. Like lifetime contract, Zach. Lifetime.
It is pretty cool to see a dude that is my size go out there and play professional football.
It gives you
pretty
weight,
cool.
right? Yeah,
it does. It is pretty cool. Let's talk about a much bigger fish than the kicker situation. That's the Daniel Jones situation. And Jake, I'll kind of tag you in here because I know you've been asking around. It seems from the outside looking in that the Colts and Jones have gotten a little bit closer, and maybe we're talking about, especially coming off an Achilles, are we talking incentives here or what? I think there is some surprise that it's not reached the resolution yet, but what's your confidence level that Jones is in fact a Colts? Because the reports seem to indicate that things are still moving in the right direction there.
It'll get done. I think just at this point, they're probably haggling over stuff that protects the Colts because Jones, I mean, the Achilles is not the first injury he's had. He's only completed 1 season in his career. So the Colts, I think, want to have things in there to protect themselves financially because they're about to probably give the guy over $100 million, at least in terms of full size of the contract. So they need to have safety nets for themselves. I have heard before that Daniel Jones' agent is like notoriously hard-nosed when it comes to negotiating as well. We know that about Chris Ballard too. So you kind of have 2 stubborn guys going at it right now. Something will get done. I mean, he's not playing under the transition tag. They'll get a multi-year deal done. I've got to imagine with the amount of chatter we heard today, it's probably coming very soon, like hopefully tomorrow, for the love of God. But yeah, I think it's around the corner. Like I said at the top of the show, I was surprised we're still here without one. But I think they're probably just kind of crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and working out the offset language, so to speak, at this point.
Yeah, one thing I will say is he's represented by Athletes First, and they live up to that moniker. They are very athletes first. They do a good job of negotiating. It's always a very intense negotiation with that agency. They'll come to an agreement, though, within the next day or so. They have a soft deadline by the new league year start tomorrow because the Colts want to get that cap space down by the start of the new league year. So they'll get it done by then. Honestly, I think they have been very close. I think that's why we got a little bit of that false alarm earlier today in terms of getting the signing done. I think the only hang up right now really comes down to just the incentive-based program going down with it because he's coming off an Achilles injury. The Colts know that. He's only been healthy for 1 full season in his NFL career. Both sides know that. The Jones side wants to get this up as high as they can. The Colts side want to protect themselves. The best way to do that is to have incentives in that deal where play all 17 games or play 15 games, whatever it's going to be, right? Then you hit this incentive to earn more money. Colts make the playoffs, hit another incentive, things like that, right? So he can up his earning potential to closer to where he wants it to be. And it's just about making sure that those incentives are in there for both sides, but those usually take a little bit longer to hammer out. So I'm assuming that's what the situation is on both sides right now. I will say whatever the tweet is that comes out from the insiders, right, where the deal is going to come out 4-year up to like $150 million or something like, or 3-year up to 150, and everyone's going to lose their mind. But that'll be like the incentive structure that'll get up there. I think what's probably going to happen, I think the base deal will come in around $37 to $38 million per year. The incentive structure will build it so if the Colts are a playoff team and or he starts all 17 games, it'll be able to bump up into the 40s a little bit closer to what he wants. So I think that it'll be perfectly fine. And then if it doesn't work, they'll be able to move off that contract while they're rebuilding the next couple of years. So I think this will work for both sides. And I think ultimately they'll get something done by 4:00 tomorrow. So I'm not too concerned there. He will be their quarterback next season without a doubt. And we'll move on from there.
Yeah, I think it's more than anything else a structure issue. Yeah, and Zach, you're right. The agent is trying to get everything he possibly can, and the Colts are trying to protect themselves. I'm sure the Colts are trying to, keep that as much space under the cap as they can, while the agent could give a damn about that cap. It's like this is your quarterback of the future. You need to pay quarterback of the future, and I'm sure that when I'm talking about structure, that you don't get a contract that's loaded up on the back end. How'd that go for Peyton Manning when he was here? So I'm sure that, and with today's contracts, you can put some guarantees in it, but then the Colts are sort of like, well, wait a minute, dude had an Achilles. I can't guarantee money for a guy that might not be 100%. But I think they're very close. The one thing I guess I had a teeny bit of worry about was somebody coming in from the outside and tampering, like another team coming in and just messing with the Colts and saying we'll give them $200 million for the next 4 years. To hell with that tag, and make the Colts match it. And then it would just blow up the whole Colts situation. But it looks like that situation doesn't exist. And so it's a structure issue, like you said.
Yeah, so I explained that to Jake the other day, that basically the way that works, it's kind of like a restricted free agent type of deal, where if you do offer him that contract, the Colts have the 7 days to match it.
Yep.
But for those 7 days, you have to have the space cleared for that.
Okay.
So it'd be hard to to tank your whole team just to mess with the Colts,
Yeah.
So I think in theory that works, but that's why we never see anybody offer the transition tag, because that money just basically goes on for just freezes for 7 days. Even if you transition tag a guy at like $12 million, like Kyle Duggar last year, to freeze up that much money in the middle of free agency could lose you out on several players. So I think they'll be fine with getting the deal done. It's just about the incentive structure. And one thing I will say about NFL contracts too, you can almost always cut off a year or two off of whatever the reported contracts are. So if a contract comes in at 3 years, it's essentially a 2-year contract. If a contract is at 4 years, it's a 3-year contract, because the guarantees usually run out by the final year of contract, because teams want to be able to cut players. Look at Michael Pittman Jr., right? He was due $29 million in cap space this next season, but only 5 of that was guaranteed. So that's kind of how it works, is like, I'm sure Jones's side is arguing for a 4-year contract, because then it's technically 3 years that he's going to be on the Colts. Colts probably want a 3-year contract, because then it's 2 years that he'd be on the Colts. And it's really weird how to explain this to everyone, but at the end of the day, they'll get this thing done. They'll move the cap space around that they need. And again, even if they have to push some of the cap to the back end of the contract, if this thing works, you're fine with that. You have your quarterback. If this thing doesn't work, then you're rebuilding in those years. So who cares if you're eating a dead cap like that, because you don't have any contracts to pay? You're cutting everybody. So overall, there's no real risk to the Colts here. Get a guy back in the building that worked well for you last year, played some really good football for you, and just see what happens. If it doesn't work, then everybody involved is going to be out of here.
Zach, can we get 90 seconds on what else the Colts need to still do in free agency? I know we talked, obviously they need to get some linebackers, right? And probably you want to do so veteran-wise and for the defensive front seven, but any other areas that we've not touched on?
Yeah, I think it's just keep looking at edge. Obviously, they can still swing fairly big at edge with Ebiketie out there, Chason out there, Hendrickson still out there. If you want to be crazy, you can offer for Jonathan Grenard, but then you would lose one of those top 100 picks. So I don't know if that's in the cards for the Colts, but you can still swing pretty big at edge, I think, with a couple of those guys, or at least bolster the edge room to make it better than what it was last year. And then it's all about just plugging holes across the roster. You don't need answers at linebacker, or answers at strong safety, or answers at running back, but you like to have like little band-aids before the draft. That way, if you have to go into training camp and you weren't able to fill it in the draft, then you at least have somebody who can perform at a solid level for you. So again, take kind of your swing at edge still. I think that's what they're waiting on with, like, after they get the Jones deal done, they're going to still wait out Hendrickson and see what they can do there. And then I think it's about just plugging some holes and getting, a couple guys back, like a Mo Alley Cox, for instance, like Joke says here in the comments section, and then just plugging out this roster and then heading into the draft and finding your linebackers and finding some other stuff there.
Yeah, and I would also throw in that in an Anarumo defense, it's not linebacker centric. He likes using the safeties to do most of his work, and edge is so important. So I think they can probably get away with not having a top flight linebacker, but somebody serviceable.
Yep, I say you got to have another edge. There's tight ends I like to back up Tyler Warren, but you need to go ahead and just get somebody. So if you want to get a blocking tight end, I know that guy from the Jaguars just got picked up today, Munt. That was kind of disappointing. I thought he would have been a good one. But, Mo Alley Cox, just go ahead and bring him back. That's fine. If you want to bring a third safety in, there are some good ones in the draft as well. But all I know is I definitely want to see linebackers coming out of the draft. I'd love to see another edge and those safeties.
Thanks so much for joining us.
I got more positions I can talk about when it comes to the draft. Just go ahead and trade Anthony Richardson, because I want you to have 10 to 12 draft picks. And then I have ideas, Chris. Call me.
Well, they're at 7 right now, so we'll see.
Let us know how that goes, Jake. Appreciate you guys joining us on the latest edition of the Colts Squad Show. We'll be back with you Thursday night at 9:00, and we will likely have some sort of Daniel Jones resolution by then. As always, the Colts news cycle never ends, so keep it locked on Jake and Zach every day on Locked On Colts. Be sure to follow at Locked On Colts on socials. Check out our other great content on YouTube and TikTok, and we will see you next time right here on the Squad Show.